Hey everybody, my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. And again, I'm here to talk about one more new library I've released. So I've done a video on Basic Element and a video on Component Zero today. And again, I've done videos on all these other libraries in the past. So you can check them all out over there on YouTube. And then again, all of them have documentation. So if you go to any of these, if there's a tutorial, I link to the tutorial. And if there's a link to the GitHub, npm, and any templates if they exist. So you can find everything you need. This is at alexmercedcoder.com/jslib for JS libraries. So today I want to go over funComponent. So the idea behind funComponent was to make a function to create web components, and something that just kind of reminisces the feel of functional components in JavaScript. Trying to really kind of get away from the use of the word this and get away from having to think about classes. And also, the benefit of this is that you don't have to worry about registering your elements. It just works. Like I've done a function that creates a web component in Merced UI. Like in that, there's a couple of them in that library. Technically, simple component is one, but in those versions of that idea, I relied heavily on string interpolation and string templates to create. Basically, the idea was you would pass in a whole bunch of strings. I would construct the class in a giant string and then run it through the eval function, and that's how I created your class. And the reason I wanted to do that is so that way you take advantage of lifecycle, because it's kind of hard. I couldn't think of another way to give you the flexibility to add more methods, to use the lifecycle function without having you define the actual class. So basically, if you could just pass in the string for where you want in the code, that would work. And it works. It works fine. But the more I think about it, the more I started creating all these alternative libraries, I thought of a way to make it happen. And essentially, just so you understand what I did here, is that technically I made it where there's a function that's called in the function. So if you want to use connected callback, you're going to end up sending a function that connected callback will call. And so that way you have access, because usually when you define connected callback in a web component, you are able to access the this keyword and access all of this's properties. So in all these functions, I'm passing the element to you. So that way you still technically have access to all the scope and variables you would have otherwise. But this way, now I don't have to rely so heavily on string interpolation, which means you don't have to worry about how you structure your strings and have to understand string interpolation. You just need to give me the pieces I need to construct your component, but you have unlimited flexibility, and using closures, we're able to create more methods. So that's what funComponent does. It basically gives you a function to create web components. And as far as I can tell, I've addressed generally all the issues with using function to create web components, or at least most of them. Okay, so let's go through it. And actually, this library I think is only 1.5 kilobytes. Let's take a look. I don't think I want to go. Actually, let's go from there. That's funComponent. funComponent is 1.3 kilobytes. Yep. So it's pretty cool. Now let's see here. Let's actually go download it. So if we click on that, let's go to GitHub. And I am going to save the CDN version. Okay, so if you've seen the previous two videos on Basic Element and Component Zoo, you know where this is going. Save link as. Save in the same place as the others. Open up my atom. And here we go. I have it right there, funComp. So now let me go change my index.html. So let me clear out all this stuff from Component Zoo, which again, in that video, I should have just been reading my own documentation before I did that video. And I'm sure I'll make some mistakes here as well, but that helps me discover what mistakes you're probably going to make to address them in this video, so that way you don't feel frustrated when you run into a wall because you saw me go through that wall. Okay, so let's see here. Let's bring in funComponent. And the reason it's called funComponent is for functional component, but fun just sounds fun. funComp.js. .js. Let's get rid of that C there, because it's going to mess everything up. Save. Cool. And basically, I'll go to app.js, and I'm just going to clean all this stuff out. And basically, to create your most basic component, so let me just get that out of the way. Okay. Basically, you're going to use the funComponent function. And in the funComponent function, you just pass in an object. So this may be very familiar if you remember like my videos on like make live component. Those functions I was talking about earlier where you pass in a bunch of strings. But you don't have to pass in any strings here. Okay, and instead of doing prefix and name, here you just pass in name. So what's going to be the name of my component? Test. You got to still make sure you do the kebab. Okay, I did it as two properties before because I wanted to make sure that people don't have to think about the kebab. But you just gonna have to remember to do that. That's just if you're working with web components, you have to remember that it's kebab case. Okay, name test, and then we have to define our render function. The render function takes in state and props, and needs to return a string. So we can keep it really simple. State to props, and then we're just gonna return the string, which is just gonna be an h1. Kind of like I generally do in these videos. State.hello. And then we'll use props. Props.user. And then the closing h1. Cool. And then we also just need to pass in the initial state. Okay. Which will be hello, property called hello, and I'll start off as the word hello. And that's it. Technically, right there, you have a component. Okay, that's all you need. And see, that's 5 lines. Very, very quick. I didn't have to use the word this at all. I didn't have to worry about constructors. I didn't have to worry about registering the component. It works. It's set and ready to go. So now if I go back to my index.html, I plop in my test slash test, and let me put in the props. User equals Bob. Save. Let's go to our browser. Let's refresh from where we were before. And it works. That's pretty nice. Now, there's a couple other things. What if you wanted to have like something that happens when the component runs? Okay, well then you're just going to define a connected function. Okay, let me just put a comma over here. And this, you just put in a function. It's going to take in the element, so I always use element. So basically, I can, let's say console log element.props. So we're going to console log the props for this particular element when it gets first connected. Why not? And then that's that. Okay, so anything you want, you can just put in a function right there. And actually, let's just show that how that works. Let's see. There it is. It console log the props. And then same thing would be for if you wanted when it dismounts, it's a disconnected function. I'm not going to do that right now, but that's there. And what's that? You want to add more functions to this? Like you wanted to add like a function that does X, Y, and Z. Then we're going to use closures. So you're going to use the, I think it's gen, or is it hook gen? Yeah, hook gen. And here you're going to pass the function. Okay, oh, no, I want a comma there. And what you can do here is you can return as many functions as you want. So if you want to return an array of functions, whatever this function returns, you'll be able to destructure or whatever. Okay, so but basically what this function does is it takes the element, you pass in the element, and then you can do whatever you want here. Okay, but just to show you sort of an example, I'm going to return another function. And what that function does is it's going to console log the props, or console.log state, element.state. Cool. And you know, so basically here you can define all the methods you want. Just instead of using this, you'll use element and have at it. Okay. And then the way this would work is that if I wanted to use it, okay, I need to go. This case, I have to go fish out. So I have to go fish out these components. That's the one little thing here, but user Bob. So I'm gonna do, you know, const Bob equals document dot query selector user equals Bob. Okay, and then we're going to use, and then that's that. Now I want to go grab those hooks out of the component that I created. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, you know, Bob state, because I'm going to call the function Bob state because it console logs Bob state. Console log const Bob state equals Bob dot hookgen. So basically, whatever your basically what happens is that the instance is going to have a function called hookgen, and what that hookgen function is doing is passing the element into this function, and then the idea is that you would return the functions you want. So this is going to return this function. You could return an array of functions, an object full of functions, literally whatever you want. You can build out all the methods you want. So you can build out your class, and again, you don't have to worry about dealing with classes. You can just do it through functions, kind of like a hook. That's why it's called hookgen. Okay, and basically this returns that function, which is now in Bob state, and now I can use Bob state as a function. There we go. And then that should be able to console log the state. Document.query select is not a function. Oh, I typed something wrong here. Yes, I did type something wrong here. Query selector. Whew. DOM exception failed to execute query selector on document user equals Bob is not a valid selector. Let's take a look at my selector here. Oh, yep. That's why these quotation marks need to be around the square brackets. Save. Thank you for instructive errors, whoever created the DOM API. There we go. And see, it works. Okay, I was able to grab that function that allows me to console log the state by using hookgen. Okay, so literally, and then, yeah. I mean, you could just have other stuff happen in there. It gives you access to the elements, so sky's the limit as far as what you want to do in there. But the idea is that the reason why that property is there is so that way you can generate more methods. So if there's any method you would have wanted to pass in the class, you can basically define the function inside the hookgen function and then just return the function and use it. Okay, the yay for closures and scoping, fun. But now this allows you to have a functionally way to play around with your web components, where you don't have to. And then again, it's a much more succinct syntax. Again, this is a lot shorter than having to go define and worry about constructors and worry about the keyword this. Yeah, and it works. So that's what funComponent does. You can get it as a standalone library. Okay. So it's right there, just fun. It just comes with funComponent, and that's it. But it's also part of Component Zoo, and Component Zoo is only about 10 kilobytes. But that also gives you the stuff that was in the Component Zoo video, which is like the styled wrapper, the my form element, the render group element, along with a lot of the things that are in my other libraries, like Merced element and chain element. So Component Zoo is a pretty solid library with what it has. But again, funComponent, simple, like a lot of these I have as separated out as small ones in case you really just want a particular base class or function for your project. Okay, because I know bundle sizes matter. So if you don't need the whole thing, you can get what you need. But at 10 kilobytes, Component Zoo pretty much gives you access to everything that's worthwhile in this whole clump. Merced UI has a few extra functions that are not in Component Zoo. I didn't include them because there were very early mock-ups of ideas that I better refined in my later classes and functions. But I can still think of sort of unique niche scenarios where someone might want to use them, so they're there. Um, but I can't. They're there if you would want to try them out. These are things like map to DOM, bind data, where basically you create. You're basically what you're doing is instead of creating a component, you're just basically creating a template that renders when state updates. So there's no HTML tag, but when you update the data, the template gets re-rendered onto the DOM to a target node, which is cool. Um, but I think most people are more in the mode of using web components with HTML tags in their HTML. So I if you still want that, still in the Merced UI library. Um, yeah, cool. So my name's Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Again, you can get all my libraries over here at alexmercedcoder/jslib. And thank you guys very much for watching.